So let's talk more about Boeing's new CEO, David Calhoun, and this massive task he has ahead. And we are joined by Matthew Driscoll, editor of Asian Aviation, live from Singapore via Skype. So, hey there, how do you think David Calhoun will fare with such an epic to-do list?
Well, to say the least, it's a gargantuan task. He's got to get the plane flying again, which he said in an email to Boeing employees that was released yesterday in the U.S. on the 13th. He said that his first priority was getting the 737 MAX back in the air. It was interesting to me that he said his second priority was rebuilding trust of the regulators and the flying public. I personally think he's got those priorities mixed up, because if you don't trust Boeing, then why would you step on a 737 MAX? I mean, I fly a lot. I'm in the aviation business, and I have to tell you, I would be concerned about getting back on a MAX plane. So I think Calhoun, again, I mean, we all know that he's got to get the plane flying again so that the cash starts coming back into Boeing instead of them sending cash out. But if nobody trusts the company, and the trust in the company is at a historic low, then they've got real problems. So I think they need to think about their priorities.
Okay, you think he's got them mixed up, but how long will it take to fix this, repair relations and reputation? Maybe he thought that would be a long-term objective.
Well, it is a long-term objective. Anytime you lose trust in someone, I mean, you think about it, you have a spouse that strays or something like that happens, you have a business partner that takes advantage of you. Rebuilding that trust does take a long time, but trust in the aviation industry is paramount. You trust the airline and the people that made that airplane. You trust them with your life every time you step on an airplane. So if that trust isn't there, why would you step on the airplane?
So do you think this crisis will give Airbus an edge in their rivalry for the next few years? Because we know Boeing has regularly beaten Airbus in terms of deliveries. Or can the right decisive turnaround actually be an opportunity for Boeing?
I think Airbus does have an advantage now, simply because they're selling lots of narrow-body airplanes and Boeing isn't. The MAX was the future of the company. It was their best-selling airplane. I think they had something like 5,000 orders. They delivered something on the scale of 430, somewhere around that figure. And as your report said earlier, Airbus has taken the lead in selling airplanes. So for now, Airbus does have an edge. Make no mistake, Boeing airplanes are not going away. You're not going to suddenly see Boeing go out of the airplane business. I do think there's a long shot possibility. Boeing, if the grounding continues and if they cannot rebuild the trust with the regulators, and not just the FAA in the U.S., but China. China was actually the first regulator to ground the MAX. If they can't rebuild that trust, I think you might see something like they either scrap the MAX and go with a clean sheet design. B, you could see Boeing commercial airplanes be split off from the rest of the company, their global services business, the defense business, because they don't want to drag those businesses down. So there's some interesting possibilities if this goes on.
And what about changing the corporate culture? We know that's something that the Volkswagen CEO had to do when he came in a few years back. Is it harder to do when you've actually been inside the company, as opposed to Herbert Diess, who came from outside to Volkswagen?
That's the $64,000 question, as we say, because David Calhoun has been on the board of Boeing for 10 years. Everything Dennis Muilenburg did, the CEO who was fired or resigned, depending on who you ask, everything he did was approved by Calhoun. Now, Calhoun, I think at one point was even was in the running for the Boeing CEO slot years ago, but he's been there for 10 years. And so he knows what's been approved and what's not, and that's why he's viewed by a lot of people, a lot of detractors, as part of the problem. And Boeing might have been better off bringing in someone from outside to really shake things up, because Calhoun and most of the Boeing board, they're not really engineers. Muilenburg was an engineer. The Boeing board now, they're financial engineers. They're very good at designing spreadsheets. They're very good at cutting costs, which is what got Boeing into this problem in the first place, was cutting costs and losing that focus on safety.
Thank you so much for your insights. That was Matthew Driscoll, who is editor of Asian Aviation, joining us from Singapore.